Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Functionally Autoimmune. Today, we have a fantastic guest, and I know you're going to be so excited. Today, we have Kimberly Spencer. She is award-winning high-performance, trauma-informed coach. She's a trainer, a best-selling author, a speaker, and the founder of Crown Yourself. Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
Hi, Brandy. How are you? It's
I'm
good to
so
be here
good.
with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're here, and I cannot wait to talk to you and share all of your wonderful experience with everyone listening.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So can you give us a little bit of insight on who you are? How did you get into the line of work that you do and kind of what led you down this path?
Yeah, so as a high performance coach, I work with leaders and people really specifically in on their mindset, their performance, their productivity, and how they're showing up for their business, for their job, so that they can really go to that next level. And what got me into this is I spent about 10, 12, 13 years teaching Pilates.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten into Pilates to support myself in a career in entertainment. I love teaching. It also was one of the main tools that really helped me overcome a 10-year battle with bulimia. And through teaching over the course of just a couple years, I started to realize that it wasn't necessarily people coming to me struggling with their body and their body image because they were technically overweight or technically not, or whether they ate healthy or whether they really didn't. What really mattered in many ways was how they were thinking about it and how their mindset around their approach to their bodies.
Mm.
And I got into I'd been teaching Pilates for 8 years, 12 something there, almost a decade. And I had the opportunity then to go into an e-commerce company that originally as a consultant to consult on taking a back stretching device to market because of my Pilates background. And I saw the device and I said, that's not just, I don't just want to be a consultant, I want to be a partner. And I partnered on that product and getting it into onto Amazon and getting it into like we got it featured in the big billboards at Times Square. I got to pitch it to the first round of Shark Tank auditions. It was like
Wow.
super exciting. And then it was super devastating when my business partner told me he wanted to buy me out 3 months before I was supposed to get married. And so I went through that summer as I was supposed to be planning for my wedding, instead negotiating with lawyers, which don't always send you the nicest emails.
Yeah.
And 3 weeks before I got married, I signed the buyout. And on my honeymoon, I was like, what do I do now? Like, I loved writing. I loved entertainment for some pieces of it. I loved the creativity, the storytelling. I just didn't love the Hollywood industry.
Mhm.
And then I loved Pilates, but that was getting kind of boring. And just because I could teach it in my sleep, and I was at the point that I was so good teaching it that it was just like I could phone it in and my clients would be like, "Oh my gosh, that was amazing." And I'd be like, "Eh." And so I I wanted something that felt deeply fulfilling and that was holistic as well because of what I'd seen through teaching Pilates, that really how what you're bringing in from your relationships, what you're bringing in from your work, what you're bringing in from all these other areas of your life, they are going into your body, and your body is the you or the common denominator in all those situations. And so I thought, I remember sitting on the couch with my husband after way too many espressos, and we were just like brainstorming on what could we put together, like what could I put together that would really fulfill me. I loved pageants and writing and health and relationships and fitness and business, and I leaped off the couch and I said, "Crown yourself." And my husband's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "I don't know, but that's the name of my company." And I immediately went to work in what I call productive procrastination, which is doing all the things that kind of spin the wheels but don't really require you to have that courage.
Yeah.
And like putting yourself out there, the fears of getting rejected, the fears of judgment, all those fears I didn't have to really lean into for about a year and a half, and it made me very complainy, very blamey. I had quite a negative mindset, and then I found out that I was pregnant, and I was like, "This is not the person who I want to be the mother of my child." That like I was complaining on a regular basis. I was negative, and I just constantly still blame my ex-business partner. And I was like, that's. I had to take ownership of my own mental story that I was telling myself. And I knew that my success in business was really correlated and similar was a similar mindset to what had allowed me to overcome my eating disorder.
Yeah.
And I knew it was a mindset shift. I also knew I had a deadline because I had a 9-month deadline before I popped out a kid. And I was like, okay, well, let me see how I can figure this out. And I immediately got a coach. I immediately got enrolled in certifications in NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. And within a couple months, I started making actual money in my business. Surprise, surprise. And then it just started to grow from there. And now I have over 8 or 9 certifications in different modalities, from somatic work like breath work and Pilates, and incorporating that and the work with the body into certified high performance coaching, sales training, EFT tapping, and all these different modalities that I just bring as this hodgepodge to my coaching and what I do, so that it's a really holistic piece.
Yeah, I love that. And you've gone through so many things to get to where you are. And I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that story.
Yeah, I think the thing is that it really came from following my curiosity.
Mhm.
It was less about living by other people's standards of like, this is the road that you need to follow to have success. And I learned that very early on from my parents, because both my parents were kind of like the black sheep entrepreneurs of their family. And then to top it off, I had become a very high performer growing up because my dad was an addict. And so I thought, maybe if I get good enough grades, maybe if I, win enough achievements, win enough awards, then I won't, then my dad will stop drinking. And that's not really the way things work. And so by high school, I was so burnt out. I was exhausted. I was constantly out of class. I had mono when I was 15. And it just, like, after that, I was just so chronically tired and depressed also in that system,
Yeah.
that I remember in high school, my senior year, my mom was like, Kim, you're so depressed. Like, I, if you want to drop out, I know you'll achieve it, whatever it is that you want to achieve in this world. But she gave me permission to drop out. I didn't, but that permission made me realize that the only person I was performing for weren't even expecting me to hold myself up to those ridiculous standards that I was holding myself to.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I know, a lot of my listeners are suffering with or struggling with or overcoming, autoimmune conditions. So a lot of times that can feel very isolating, and you can feel like you don't have control of your life, and that, you have all these things. So do you have tips for helping people kind of get out of that mindset and finding a different way to be more positive and move forward?
Yeah, definitely just start listening to the story that you're telling yourself. Um, because I know it can be challenging to remove yourself, almost like you're watching the movie of your own life.
Yeah.
If you were watching yourself up on a screen, living your life, what are you hearing the main character, you, saying? Like, so constantly, I would be saying things like, I'm so exhausted, or um blaming my body. Like, that was especially back when I was bulimic. I would blame my body. I would felt like a prisoner of my body because I didn't like the body that I was in.
Yeah.
And I can understand, from having worked with people with autoimmune conditions, is that when your body feels like a prison, it's so challenging to because we're in this all the time.
Yeah.
So being able to look at least, what is the story that I'm telling myself? What are the things that I'm constantly repeating? Am I constantly saying, oh, I can't, or oh, um I hate my body, or I hate this, especially when we are feeling like we're at war with that thing. Because
Yeah.
the more we try to, like, resist it, the more apparent it is. So
Yeah.
that just happens with resistance in anything, whether it's somebody trying to go to the next level in their business, or somebody feeling like they're fighting their body. And so we can look at, where is that resistance that's coming up for us? Like, what, And what is it that we're telling ourselves in that story? Is it really that we can't, or maybe it's that we're choosing, which can be such a much more powerful word. I'm choosing to take a nap now instead. Like, it's not that I can't push through. Like, you instead choose. So you claim that power of choice back,
Mhm.
even if it's a small choice, even if it's a small choice to take a nap, even if it's a small choice to get some extra rest for the day. At least that is bringing it back to owning that power, that you have the power to choose, and you have the power to take that next step according to what is it that feels good. And then asking yourself, well, what is it that feels good? And if you're struggling with something, like, obviously I'm not a doctor, but asking yourself, what is it that makes me feel good? And if you're used to being in a body that doesn't feel so good,
Yeah.
what is it? Where in my body does it not feel so bad? Like, where can I focus on in my body as a place of resource that doesn't feel so bad, that maybe feels at least not that bad? And find that place. It can be as small as like the tip of your finger. It can be as large as like the skin on your covering all of your body, but finding those places where your body doesn't feel that bad and allowing yourself to breathe into that space and find gratitude for at least there's that space that doesn't feel so bad, and finding that, and in that way you get to somatically rewrite that story a bit as well, because we can, when we wrap everything into the bubble of everything hurts, everything feels bad, well then we're kind of up, you know what, creek without a paddle, because what are we going to do? So if we can find, at least if we can chunk it down from it being this like everything bubble and everything sucks, all hurts, to, well, at least my eyes feel really good, or my earlobes feel really lovely, or and then seeing, what does that feel like? What does it actually feel like to not feel that bad? Does it feel soft? Um does it feel loving? Does it feel expansive? Does it feel nothing?
Yeah.
Like, whatever it is, allowing yourself to name it and claim it, so that you can find those places in your body. And I had, like, for me, when I was going through bulimia, that's the closest comparison I can give. And I didn't like being in my body, and I didn't like the body that I had. I looked at, like, well, today my rib cage, my waist feels nice, and feels my waist feels good. So, like, I wouldn't focus on the fact that, like, after my waist there were like some lovely curvaceous hips that have now birthed two beautiful children. But that I would focus on, okay, well, my waist feels good, my waist looks good to me. So I would find those places that look good or that felt good, so that I could reiterate and change the story, that it wasn't all bad.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I love all of that. And definitely changing our story can make such a big difference in how we feel about everything. So I wanted to mention too, because when I introduced you, we talked about how you were trauma informed. How do you feel that trauma or those types of things in your life can play into kind of your mindset and how you handle things?
um it's interesting. One of the things, especially if you've experienced childhood, like, physical abusive or sexual trauma in as a kid, I would have thought that that makes you more emotionally resilient, because you're like, oh, I faced this as a child, I can handle anything. Not so. Actually, according to the studies, those who have experienced childhood physical, emotional, sexual trauma actually have a less of a window of tolerance for that, for more traumatic events, for stress. They have less of a window of tolerance. And the body is such an interesting uh manifestation of so many things. I mean, if you think about it, your subconscious mind is running your body on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And our subconscious mind, our mind and our body have such a deep, intimate connection. I mean, you have more signals going from your gut to your brain than your brain does to your gut.
Mm.
And so when we look at trauma, that the ability to look at okay, what happened, and to look at the story, and to look at the story that we're telling ourselves of what that experience means for us,
Yeah.
that can shape so much of the story that we tell ourselves, and it can also allow us to be liberated from some of the prisons
Mm.
that we're in. It just depends on the meaning that you're putting attached to that trauma. So like when I say that there's a difference between being a victim and having a victim mindset, being a victim means that you were the victim of an experience, something bad happened.
Yeah.
And as I write about in my book Rule Your Body, which is coming out this year, when something bad happens to you, we all have this perception called the just world bias, where it's our toddler's subconscious mind that's wanting to make sense of something that's nonsensical. It's wanting to make sense of something that's not fair. That's something, especially when it's emotional, physical, sexual abuse, like it's not fair. It wasn't right, and it's not your fault. Our toddler subconscious mind, though, if you like have a toddler, they they're like they want fairness.
Yeah.
And so what our just world bias does, and we see this play out in the media when one of the and I'll use the most ridiculous example, that uh it's like when somebody says, or somebody tries to justify a woman getting raped, and they're like, well, it was probably what she was wearing.
Right.
And that's not necessarily to say that person's an idiot. That's just saying that that person, their just world bias is trying to make sense of something that's not sensical.
Yeah.
It's something that's not fair. And so they're trying to attach some other form of meaning
Mm.
to why this bad things happen, because it's still our toddler subconscious minds are trying to wrap around the fact that bad things happen to us in
Yeah.
this world sometimes. And it's how we deal with them and how we process them. And so, with the just world bias, especially for high achievers, when we experience trauma, when we experience something that bad happened to us, and we were a victim of an experience, and yet, and especially for what I found with working with high achievers, a lot of whom have had trauma in their past, that just world bias kicks in. And so we go into I forget the psychologist who coined the phrase the drama triangle, but we go into the villain role
Mm.
of our own drama triangle. And in the drama triangle, we have the hero, the villain, and the victim. The victim is the victim of the circumstance, everything happens to them. The hero is the person who straps on the cape and goes to the rescue. That's the role that I would step into regularly with my dad with his addiction, where I would, let's get him into a rehab home and let's get him into this. Like so I would regularly step in that, and that can be a very codependent, almost enabling role. Like my dad didn't actually start to heal from his addiction until I removed myself from that. I staged his intervention and I was like, bye. And then he had to take ownership that his actions were the next step. It wasn't me like dragging him to rehab.
Sure.
Um, and the third one is the villain. And the villain is you take so much responsibility that you take other people's percentage of their responsibility for that experience. And so you put yourself in the villain role, and you're at cause for everything. And
Right.
you're at cause for all the bad shit that happens in the world.
Yeah.
And neither of those are true. And the beautiful thing is that when you can flip the drama triangle on its head, the victim can become the creator, the villain can become the challenger of the circumstances, and the hero can become the coach. And so, looking at how, when you're in that just world bias, that you're both the victim and the villain of your circumstance, because you're thinking, oh, I must have done something to put myself in this experience, to have that experience. And what that does is it really messes with your perceptions of what you believe that you deserve. And that's where we get the beliefs of like, I deserve to be punished, or I deserve to be hurt, or I deserve to be in a body that I don't like, or in a body that's hurting me. Like, and that's where we get those perceptions that they can really come to light in that way. And so if we just can have that little bit of compassion for ourselves to start seeing, okay, I was a victim, because so often, especially, we don't want to see ourselves as a victim, especially because I've experienced sexual, physical, emotional trauma. We don't want to see ourselves as weak. We don't want to see ourselves in that space of ever being a victim ever again, of anything ever happening.
Yeah.
And yet, if we can come at it from that space of acknowledgement that yes, something did happen. No, it was not our fault. and we can allow ourselves to have that compassion of like, well, what did we learn from it? Because
Right.
I can say from my, and I speak just from my own experience of what I experienced growing up, was that it prepared me for what I do today. So I was able to look across the room in a room of 2,000 people and catch a guy just by looking in his eyes and be like, that guy needs to be in our group. And we were breaking into these small groups and in this big conference. And I just saw him, and it was just like a gut instinct. And I would never have had that had I not had those experiences as a child.
Yeah.
And I looked at him, and we were all supposed to go around sharing what our biggest trauma was, basically what was the biggest thing that we had to overcome. He it just so happened that I pulled him into a group where three of us had experienced sexual abuse, and I shared about the fact that when I was a child, I was molested by my father, and which was something that later he gave me permission to share. I said I would never share it until after he passed. He passed earlier this January, and he wanted me to share that story because he also was sexually abused by his mother, and so the cycle repeats until we say it stops. And so once he got sober, he said, Kim, I want you to share the story. I want you to help that 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys. And I said, okay, I won't share it until you're dead.
Yeah.
But after that, I will happily share that, and hopefully that can bring to light some help for some people.
Yeah.
And so I was in this group with this gentleman, and we all were sharing about our stories. And it got to him, and I looked him in the eye, and I knew he was totally going to make some crap up. Like I knew. And I just looked at him, and he looked at me in the eye, and he says to this day, he says he'll never forget the way I looked at him because he just knew. He said, you peered into my soul. And he shared for the first time his story of his own sexual abuse and how he had been raped. And through that, we then took him, me and another coach ended up escorting him out and kind of talking him through the breakthrough. And now years later, we reconnected, and he has the brightest smile. It's so truthful. It's so beautiful. He hated his body before because he felt like he was imprisoned by his own secrets
Wow.
and from the shame from those. And he was able to totally transform his life. He now has a beautiful, authentic smile. And I didn't know that that night he had been planning to commit suicide.
Wow.
And the thing is I would never have had that skill set had it not been for what I happened to me
Yeah.
as a child. The thing is, I rewrote the story from being broken and damaged and a victim to saying that everything that happened to me as a child prepared me for what I do today and to serve the level that I'm able to serve at. And I remember after being in that room with him, after him having his breakthrough, I actually called my dad and I said, Dad, I don't know if you know this, but we did something very special today. I said, I think we saved a life. I later had that confirmed, but I said, I think we saved a life. And I said, I know you still feel guilt and shame for what you did. At the same time, I wouldn't have been able to do what I just did if it hadn't been for you. So thank you.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. That's such an amazing story, and it's really true. I mean, you have endured so many things, you've had so many challenges, but you change that around to something that is now positive, and that you're helping other people, and that you're able to get them to the other side of that. And I think that's really great. It's super courageous as well to share those stories, because they can be very difficult to talk about and to share and to definitely publicly express and talk about. So that's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think it's just shame loves secrets.
Mhm.
And so if we want to, and our emotions, we are emotional beings. Emotions live in our bodies. I was working with one client who had such chronic pain, and he just constantly was feeling like he was at war with his body. And it was through actually a breath work session that he realized that he broke the story that he was in pain all the time, because he would have moments, and those moments of him saying, oh, I'm actually not in pain right now, like through the breathwork session, he was able to realize that the story that he was telling himself that he was always in pain was actually not 100% true.
Mm,
He had moments where he wasn't in pain. He had moments where he actually felt nothing or felt good.
yeah,
And so he was able to rewrite that story because he just started to examine it. And we were doing it somatically, but you can do it somatically through breath work or through coaching, through therapy, through finding those support resources and those tools to
yeah,
be able to really uplift your skill set. Because if you can just have a few more tools in your toolbox, like I wasn't born Miss Personal Development Junkie, rewrite your story. Like I was massively in a victim mindset for years and years. And that's also what caused me to be in such a deep depression
mm,
in my high school stage, because I was living by this story that I was broken, damaged, and a victim. And thus it felt like my world was crumbling.
right.
And so if we can just take a moment to like look at ourselves, not being the thinker of our thoughts, not being the feeler of our feelings, but being the examiner of what are those thoughts and what are those feelings coming up without judgment,
Yeah,
and looking and allowing for those thoughts and feelings and going, huh, there's that thought again that I'm broken. That's an interesting one. Huh. Giving it a moment, giving it some space, not giving it judgment, not saying it, oh, I shouldn't be feeling like this, or oh, I should never. Like, because when you should yourself, you're denying what actually is. So
right.
if you're allowing yourself to be in the moment and be accepting of what actually is and saying, okay, I accept the fact that this is present with me right now,
Yeah,
and allowing that, well, what is the story that I'm then telling myself about this, and then allowing yourself to just examine what are those thoughts, and is that story ultimately true?
right.
Really giving it that question, is that story, like, is the story that you're constantly hurting ultimately true? Like maybe there is a moment like in the shower today that you were like, oh, I actually am not in pain. Like this shower feels lovely. Like, so allowing yourself to question, and once you can give yourself examples, because your brain is wired to focus on what you train it to focus on. It's called our reticular activating system in the brain. So if you're constantly telling yourself a story of how you're broken or damaged, then your brain is going to just, your subconscious mind wants to please you. So it's going to seek out more examples to prove that you're right. It
Mm,
likes making you right.
yeah,
So if you can allow yourself to be wrong about the story that you've told yourself and to question it and to say, well, what new story could I possibly tell myself? Maybe I'm not always in pain.
mm,
Maybe I have moments of feeling good, and allowing those moments to, because then once you acknowledge those moments, then your brain can go, oh, and you also had this moment yesterday too. Oh,
yeah,
and you also had this moment last week. And so no longer does that story become the perpetuating balloon of everything is wrong, and instead it goes into like, find it, your brain will start going into finding examples where it's not that bad.
yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. I want to touch on something that you said because I think it's important. You've mentioned kind of doing work through breath work, tapping, things like that. How exactly do those work? Can you explain that a little bit? Like, how does that help someone get out of their own head and kind of change their mindset? Can you explain just a little bit about those?
Yeah. So I'll start it with my background in Pilates, because Pilates, I didn't know that I was rewiring my body. My body, because of my childhood experiences, I grew up in constant fight, flight, freeze trauma cycle. Like that was our default.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know how to activate my parasympathetic nervous system. So you have two different nervous systems. You have your sympathetic, which is your fight, flight, freeze, which is great if you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
If you're living under chronic stress, that's what's going on. That's what's the nervous system that's getting all janky, and is causing, it can cause crashing, like anxiety and crashing depression and chronic fatigue, when you're in that constant sympathetic stimuli. Versus then you have your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. Now, in a normal, I'm going to just use that. I hate the word normal, but I'm just going to use it for context sake.
Sure.
Uh, a generally our bodies are supposed to oscillate. So we're supposed to have this nice smooth oscillation, spikes of, fight flight, which is great. It's great if you're going to go play a sport. It's great if you need to go kick a goal. It's great if you need to go work out and get like a really awesome, let's do this Peloton ride.
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to be able to oscillate, but if our nervous system hasn't been trained like muscles to regulate back into that parasympathetic state, we get lost in the sympathetic, which can be a trauma cycle.
Mhm.
So by allowing that oscillation, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated through breath work. It's activated through yoga, qigong, Pilates. So Pilates, because it's combining and you can activate the parasympathetic nervous system within 90 seconds. Like if I said to just take a nice inhale and then you exhale longer than you've inhaled, just by doing that, if you were to keep doing that for 90 seconds, your parasympathetic nervous system would be shifted on. So that is the breath that you attach it to yoga, and it's the breath that you do in Pilates. And so that form of breath work, in a way, that can activate that parasympathetic nervous system, start training it so that your body is able to oscillate more from the stress, so that your body is able to oscillate from that fight, flight, freeze into that that parasympathetic nervous system, so that you're able to rest, digest, your body can process it. So that's why I highly recommend yoga and Pilates and qigong and that. Now, breath work, I am certified in what's called Bbtrs breath work, which is biodynamic breath work and trauma release. So what that session focuses on is we focus on activating the sympathetic nervous system through the breath, which you can do very easily through like when you're I mean, you hear about when somebody's having a panic attack, like they that's their sympathetic nervous system that's like, I need to fight, flight, flee, go somewhere, like run away. And so that's the breath that's guiding that. So with biodynamic breath work, what I do is I guide my clients into activating the breath in a controlled environment so that then they can then deactivate it. So we're practicing building that resiliency of flowing from a sympathetic into a parasympathetic, from an active into a deceleration, so that way it helps to increase more flow in the body. It increases more blood flow. Because a lot of times, I love the work of Dr. John Sarno, the author of Healing Back Pain. Have you read it?
Yeah.
Amazing. Like literally, I had a client, her life like transformed through that book.
Yeah.
and that work, our body and our emotions and our breath is so intimately tied. And so when we breathe, it helps to create more oxygen, which helps to oxygenate our muscles, which helps to expand. I believe it's expanding the capillaries so that they're not getting so constricted and tight. So the breath actually helps with oxygenating all those areas of our body to help bring that greater sense of flow, bring that greater sense of release, so that we can release that trauma. The other thing with EFT tapping, you have nerve cells all over your body, and those nerve cells respond to the stimuli that it's environmental, internal, whatever you got going on. And so if you're able to tap, and I did this, I do this on my 6-month-old because he's having teething pain. And I just do a little tapping because the vibration, it helps to stimulate that area that is kind of feeling stuck and sore. And the vibration, because everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. And we are as dense as we may feel, we're actually energetic beings. We actually are vibrating at a cellular subatomic level.
Yeah.
And so if we can activate and stimulate some greater vibration into our body, it can actually help with shifting whatever is maybe vibrating a little denser like matter, instead of and then allowing us to be a little bit more expansive like energy. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yes, I love that. And I think that was a great explanation of kind of how all of that works and how that it can help you, because I think a lot of times people want something to help them kind of get out of where they're stuck and they just don't know where to turn. So having those types of procedures and those types of techniques, and having a little bit of information about that, I think will help a lot of people know what to look for.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like and I know when you're on the quest of like, does this work? Is this like some woo-woo thing? Like, wait, I'm supposed to just breathe?
Right. Don't I do that anyway? Right.
Yeah, but I can tell you, I mean, I had just for breath work, because I had never been exposed to specific breath work until 12 months ago. And one of my mentors got certified in this modality, and I was like, I'm up for another new certification. I always like to get another certification when I'm pregnant. And I was like, I knew nothing about it. I just was like, sure, let's
Yeah.
learn this. And it was transformative for my labor, because labor is an oscillatory process. You have the contraction or the surge, and then you have the deceleration, and you actually can have minutes of rest. But I didn't realize that from my first labor, because with my first son, it took me 24 hours.
Oh,
And that was because I was holding on to this contracted state, because the surges for in that first experience were so intense
yeah.
that I was holding on to like a fear of the next contraction.
Right.
And so, and how often is that a metaphor for life, especially when you're living with an autoimmune condition or a chronic pain? Because the fear of, oh my gosh, is today going to be a bad pain day, or is today going to be another uh is today going to be another challenge? We're holding on to that fear instead of fully allowing it to release, and allowing those moments of spaciousness, allowing those moments of rest, of like, oh, actually today feels pretty good,
Yeah.
versus the fear of like, I don't know if it's going to suck tomorrow.
Right.
So allowing for that oscillation to then speed up the process. So my labor for the first baby took 24 hours, because I was holding on to a contracted state, so my body wasn't able to oscillate and fully release.
Right.
After learning breath work for and doing breath work for 9 months while pregnant, my labor took 2 hours.
Oh my gosh.
My
Wow.
baby came out so fast, my husband had to catch him because the midwife wasn't here yet.
Wow, that is fast. That's amazing though. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I love everything and I could keep talking about this all day, but I want to make sure that we have time to share information on how to get in touch with you. Anybody who wants to work with you or have more information about any of the things that you do, I want to make sure that we have time to share that. So can you share how people can find you and reach out to you?
Yeah, if you want to connect with me, if this conversation really resonated with you, then definitely just head on over to crownyourself.com. I have an amazing love hypnosis for you when you pop onto that site. So head on over to crownyourself.com and download that love hypnosis, so that you can love yourself, love your body, love others, and be a vessel of love and light in the world.
Oh, I love that. That's such a great offering to give to everyone, especially, when people are geared towards you or looking for support. That's such a great way to kind of welcome them. So I love that. And you have a lot of great programs and things like that on your website as well that they can find, correct?
Yeah, yeah. And you can always just reach out to me. We have tons of free resources, from our blog to our podcast, The Princess and the Bee, which is on all the bees on becoming the queen, including your body,
Love that.
bodies, babies, business, bank accounts, all the things. We have great resources on Queen TV, which is much more geared toward if you're starting a business and looking to really find your genius zone and lead and be in a leadership position, and how you can lead no matter what challenges you're facing, and really how to rewrite your story. That is where we specialize, is in transforming other people's stories to champion them to become the leaders that you're born to be. Because I do believe that everything in a way is happening for you. And even though it may not feel like it, and even though it may suck in the process sometimes, if we can look at what is that story that we're telling ourselves and rewrite that, then, and if I can support you in that in any way, I look forward to doing so.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for being on today and for sharing all of your amazing stories and great insight. I appreciate it so much. And I know that my listeners are probably so thrilled to have listened to all of this. So thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brandy. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode. Again, if you want to get in touch with Kimberly, I will make sure that all of her information is in the show notes in case you didn't have a chance to write those down. And we will catch you again on the next episode. Bye-bye.